Hi, I'm the True Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. You can say a lot about Deltarune. So many things that this video could be a list about the ways you could talk about the game. You could talk about the amazing story, the gameplay, the visuals, the music, or maybe Toby Fox himself. This video isn't about them. Well, in a more direct sense, but more about how we talk about it. This video isn't me talking about Deltarune directly, but talking about the thoughts I had in my head while playing the game. However, I want to use this game as a jumping off point to talk about these thoughts in a way that allows me to explore our medium just a little bit. I'm sorry if this isn't that interesting. I'll probably talk about the Deltarune game after this video, after I do my archival, but we could talk about that later. So I just hope you'll enjoy this video for what it's trying to do and maybe question your own thoughts and feelings about the game and maybe how you think about our medium. Because really, at the end of the day, this video is meant to be more of a me thing, just trying to stretch out my mind a bit, try to think about these ideas. Not to say that I'm actually going really in depth, but I am trying to start my own thought process about this and maybe start yours. So with that said, let's actually start with the first thing that really came to my mind, that being Deltarune and the separation of the source. See, before I even started Deltarune, I was actually thinking about Undertale for a little bit, and I was watching Super Eyepatch Wolf's video about Undertale, and its many fan-made spin-offs that have in a way over-eclipsed some of the original material. And through that, it led me to question the nature of how we get introduced to a game or any medium, really. How we can always see the weirdest parts first before we're actually seeing the actual juicy bits. In fact, my first introduction to Undertale as a kid was this video.
Flowers are stupid.
How dare you! Now you must die!
Hadouken! What an asshole. Swiping already. I thought you wanted to get back with me!
Sorry, honey bunches of voting tins,
I
but
don't want to hear it after your ass anymore! Oh, hi, child.
Die.
And it is kind of funny, but it's like funny in that way of, oh my god, they thought this was funny. Some of it still holds up, but you know what I mean. And ironically, that did still lead me to try out Undertale. But through that irony, it led me to really question something for a moment. How do you view a piece of fiction or art or anything really, when it's both overshadowed yet stands side by side the original? Like, Deltarune pulls a lot of things from Undertale, and overall, while different, it's still built on the same foundation of Undertale. And that does really make me wonder if some of my enjoyment of the game is not even my own, and just built on the, for lack of a better term, nostalgia of the original Undertale. Now, that's not to say that the game is trying to manipulate you into feeling a particular way about the game's characters. Hell, the game development of Deltarune has been in the works for a really long time, and the characters in Deltarune are uniquely different in minor ways, but interesting in their own right. I'm just making an observation and questioning how much of my own enjoyment is built wholly on the game in and of itself. Like, maybe to give an example to more fundamentally understand what I'm trying to say, my love of the Clone Wars show. But my love of that show is built on my love of the prequel material. And yeah, I said it, like, if you don't like 1 and parts of episode 2, I get it, but hey man, episode 3 is like really good. It's literally my favorite Star Wars movie. And in today's climate, its themes really hit home. But I'm going off topic. But you're getting what I'm saying, right? I like the prequel trilogy, so anything that builds off it is something that makes me more interested in it. And it's just telling me, can I enjoy this material on its own, rather than how it fits together into a bigger part of itself that isn't even really connected? Or maybe to give another game example, Final Fantasy. Is my enjoyment of one of these games carrying over to another Final Fantasy game, making me enjoy it more than I would if it didn't even have the name? Or maybe the opposite is true as well, where I dislike something because it's a part of something else that I just don't like as well. Because we really don't ever talk about it that way, like how much our love and dislike of something can infect us from enjoying other parts of other things. Like, to give an example, I really really don't care for the Souls-like games, but Neo was a game I actually enjoyed a lot, and I feel weird about that. I stopped myself from enjoying something that I really would have liked because of the relation to another series. To note, I'm not calling Dark Souls bad, I just don't care for them. I just hope you're understanding what I'm saying. Like, how much can we enjoy something on its own merits before at some level it is at a way superseded to our own feelings of before? I truly do believe nothing can be truly viewed in a void because, well, that's not a good way to think about things, but it's a good idea to question how much you enjoy something and understanding that degree of separation. And maybe we should talk about this more and maybe have someone else smarter than me actually talk about this matter. But hey, maybe my question is nonsense and I don't even get my own question. So tell me yourself. Deltarune, Chapter 1, RPG Bullet Hell and Genre Mixing. If you've seen any discussion of the game, you will hear about the RPG mechanics and combat and how it flipped the script of it. And I kinda want to talk about that. As much as we talk about it being an RPG, we never talk about the way the game is a bullet hell, more times than not. Like, the core gameplay is about the bullet hell dodging mechanic, while also trying to either kill or mercy them. I just find it's strange in a way that we just ignore it due to the idea of that one subject matter is more interesting in a sense. The conversation of how this game lets you talk to an enemy instead of murdering them isn't even particularly new. There have been a few games throughout all of gaming history that has had this as a core mechanic. Hell, my next RPG archive review is about one of those games. Well, sorta, but you get the main point is you can talk out of most fights. And no, it's not an SMT game. The point is, we are ignoring the more interesting idea of discussion here that we could have. That being how genre combinations can create interesting ideas, and how we can learn from this game. Like, I mean, this idea is very interesting and could be explored further by many people. What about an RPG-esque bullet hell shooter? Depending on how well you're doing, you can improve your stats and maybe customize your ship a lot more throughout the game. Or maybe an FPS sports game where your goal is to aim for targets while trying to gain more points over your opponent. Or maybe an cooking MOBA, or maybe, I don't know, you're getting the idea of what I'm saying. There's an interesting idea of the combinations out there and we don't really discuss them in a way that's interesting to our design. I mean, like, some do notice, but good luck getting others to notice it too. But that did lead me to my other half of the question. When does one decide that one belongs to a major genre? Like, as much as it is an RPG, it's not just an RPG. This can be construed as complaining about the nature of genre simplification, but not entirely. But more my question is about our ability to limit our ability to see beyond the genre. By that I mean, as much as we can talk about a genre, do we prevent the exploration of the genre's potential by our ideas of how they function? Like, that combination is interesting by the fact that they both have very different strengths to them. RPGs can be longer by their design to allow them to take on more consideration for stories and maybe some battles, and also allowing for someone else to maybe take a break in between story beats to prevent burnout. While bullet hells, by their very nature, are very quick, fast-paced, putting you on your toes, never giving you much room to feel safe, while these systems are trying to challenge you to dodge everything in a particular pattern so you can survive. On the surface of these two genres, they seem incongruent, not able to work well together, but by combining them in minor ways, you are able to bring out the potential of both really well, taking on the careful planning of an RPG, but also combining the intensity of bullet hells into one moment, allowing for the gameplay to really feel interesting and individualized, since each fight can be individualized to an interesting degree. And some fights later on would be more individualized to such a degree that they don't even look the same as some other ones, like the one in Chapter 4 where you're running through a maze, but if you're taking too long, something will chase you, and it's interesting. It really does show the dynamics of what this system can do and what you can explore with this system. And really, all I want to say is, at the end of the day, my point is, we could talk about gameplay feeling really more interesting and more fleshed out if we actually experimented more with the ways we think about genre and the ways we combined it. And maybe we should explore how we think about it, and I don't know, I'm sorry for kind of going on a weird tangent here, but just how I am. Let's talk about our next subject matter, and it's gonna go into a weird spot, so hear me out, okay? Episode 2, Spec Ops: The Line and Optics. Whenever we talk about Spec Ops: The Line we always seem to skip is a particular part of the game and the discussion that happens around it. That should honestly be more discussed because every time I hear it, I get pissed off. I am not in any way denying that Spec Ops: The Line is an important game. In fact, as a piece of fiction and as a piece of political media, it's still relevant to this day, which is really sad in a lot of ways, but still. However, one of the aspects about the game that some people do talk about, not all of them, but some do, but they do it in a half-handed way. We'll talk about it there, but point is, there's a part of the discussion we don't talk about that maybe we should. In this part, we're talking about how I feel about the finger wagging the game does at the end of Spec Ops: The Line. Does it really work, or really work in any media? The thing I'm referring to is a thing that people think the game is doing, but I think it can't really do that because even if it is, the message, it doesn't really work. So allow me to explain what I'm talking about. See, in a lot of the game's discussion, there's a talk about the nature of, well, the player choice, and how the player has the choice to not play the game. And that choice can appear throughout a lot of other discussions of other games, but, you know, we'll talk about that some other time. Or, well, we're talking about it now, but about other games, but those other games. But we're talking about Spec Ops: The Line here, so let's not really diverge off point. My point is, when somebody says, you could have left the game at any time, turned it off, and not played it, I find that to be the most bullshit, bad point of discussion. Do you know what that sounds like? The best way to put it and explain it is someone doing a play on Macbeth and then talking to the actor Macbeth and said, "God damn it, Jerry, why did you do all this? Like, why are you blaming the actor for playing the role they were given?" In a lot of ways, we really don't talk about the nature of the performative aspect of gaming and the requirement it requires us to be. Whether that means you play the goody-goody two-shoes or the morally corrupt bastard. My point is, you are just playing a role in order to explore ideas and concepts the game is trying to explore while you are doing this. And then to pull the finger on us, saying we're the bad person for doing this, unless you're going for a more meta sense in a way of like the Stanley Parable and other games like it, you really can't. Blaming the player for, you know, performing the role they were given, it's just a non-argument. And by doing so, I believe you are harming the message you are trying to convey throughout the entire game by doing this. Because you see, by putting the blame both on Walker and the player, you're lessening Walker's crime, and by extension, letting him get off scot-free for the choices he made throughout the entirety of the game. And I know the game doesn't, but it's in a half-hearted way that just doesn't work. But this leads into my sort of half problem, because there is a way you can point the finger at the player, but I believe it does it in the reverse. Allow me to explain. Instead of blaming the player for keeping going and could have left at any time, you could have just gone the opposite direction and said, "Hey, you chose this, motherfucker. Don't get pissy at me for you choosing to talk about this and coming here to us." You know what I mean? At least then, the game has the right to say whatever it wants to say about the player because you chose this. And that kind of leads me into my problem with Spec Ops: The Line. How it can judge you, but refuses to actually give you the choice to be judged properly. Games by its very nature is interactive, and thus it can actually explore options when given to you. Thus, when it gives you options to be judged by, it has the right because you chose options that made you bloodthirsty. I mean, hell, there are actually a few times throughout the game where the game can judge you, but never does because it judges you on an implicit level rather than an explicit level, if that makes sense. Basically, it blames you inherently rather than just doing so on its own, through your own actions. Like, there's a few times where you could accidentally kill civilians and the game will never comment about that, which is very strange because I thought the game would, but whatever. Yeah, like, here's a real example. In this level right here, there's a civilian here, and you could actually shoot them, but no one comments on it. I find it very interesting that the game doesn't say anything about it, but then again, that actually does add to the level of the game. Like, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to say. If the game refuses to let the player be the more peaceful option, it can't really judge you. Like, Deltarune, and by extension, Undertale, has every right to judge the player because it makes it a point to say that whatever you do, your choices do have an impact, and if you want the good ending, you actually have to play nicely. And if you want to get the genocide route, yes, that's the actual name for it, you actively have to have a terrible time. It is the most soul-sucking experience ever, not only because it's boring, but because it's just uninteresting because killing everyone isn't that interesting. The only real interesting parts about that route is mostly that you have interesting fights. That's it. And thus, it can actually judge you because you went out of your way to do it. You could have not done it. The choice was in your hands, but you chose to be the asshole. You know what I mean? Telling the player they're a terrible person because they chose to do something is entirely different than being told you're just a terrible person for merely even playing the game. And I find that to be very much the point of what I'm talking about. And maybe we should have a discussion more about how even the nature of that can be very obfuscated by the very nature of how our game designs work. But we can have that some other day. I'm just sorry for talking about this. I just wanted to talk about it because after watching both Jacob Geller's video about Spec Ops The Line and also to Snakera's video about, well, ironically, Spec Ops The Line and 50 Cent's Blood on the Sand, which was ironically a very much a parody version of a lot of video essays, but actually made some interesting points that led me to making this part of the discussion, that led me to think about this. Go watch both of those videos, by the way. They're very well done. But you get the idea of what I'm trying to say. And really, if you really want to judge the player, maybe you should just do it properly and not just say they are bad. But let's continue on. Episode 3. What do you mean I'm lost? Secret hunting is something a lot of people love to do. A lot of games out there are made and practically designed for people to explore to the nth degree. Either in Zelda with that secret item that can increase your arsenal and your ability to actually solve puzzles. Or Hollow Knight, where you had to go from finding this lowly worm thing to plot crucial items. However, there is a question that always brought up into my mind when thinking about secret hunting. Like, at what point does it become too much? Like, when can secret hunting make the game experience worse? Because I do think it's an interesting question, because at some point you're going to miss out on something, and that can be a detriment to the game's experience. To give an example, the Tales game, where there are so many secrets that it is a nightmare to just even find most of them, even if you're following a guide. And through that, you're missing out through a bunch of stuff like items, dialogue, and so many other things. It's really tiring to play those games if you don't want to miss them. Or to give a more Metroidvania example like I did before, which are designed for the idea of exploring everything, the inverted castle in Symphony of the Night, where in that game you have to actually explore a very particular room that you need particular items in order to just even access, and then have to figure out a way to get those items to work well together before you can even get to the inverted castle. And to explore all the inverted castle, you have to find other secreter items that are hidden in the inverted castle. You get the idea of what I'm saying. I'm just making a point about how much of a secret can a secret be before it starts becoming annoying just to do. A secret can only ever be so interesting in the idea of chasing it that it is possible to do so. Or at least that's what my mind thinks of. Because more times than not, when a game tries to have secrets, it's usually in a way where it's not so out of your way. But that's kind of always the question. How far can it be before the secret starts being fun or interesting to chase? Like, a game of Tunic wants you to find all the secrets, and it's willing to hide a bunch of stuff from you in order to make you find those secrets. I think there's a distinction between games like that and a normal game of, I don't know, Devil May Cry. They have different desires of secrets and the necessary degree of those secrets. And maybe we should talk about the line a little bit more. I don't know. I'm only thinking about this so much is because I didn't get the chance to do the secret events for Chapter 3 and 4. Mostly because they're very well hidden, and unless you're willing to go really out of your way at times just to explore the entire map and do certain things in a particular way, you will not be able to access them. And I don't know, part of me just hates that. And maybe it is just a personal thing and I'm just overthinking this as a problem, but I think there is a question about how much of a secret can be too much of a secret. And yes, I know the last part was dealing with a more interesting subject matter. This is just, again, a video for me to try to think about a few thoughts in my head that I want out of my head. So, let's actually talk about something more interesting. Episode 4. Fate and our inability to comprehend it. Fate is a weird concept when you really start thinking about it. Fate is, for lack of a better term, an absolute be-all and end-all. No matter your thoughts and feelings on the matter, it will happen. No choice you will make will ever change it. Maybe the variation of the fate, but the fate will stay the same nevertheless. In Chapter 4, fate plays a large part in the chapter. Literally, the game begins with, your choices don't matter. This chapter focuses on it heavily. And really, I really want to only talk about this because we don't usually talk about fate in a meta sense. I mean, some games do, like, for example, the Stanley Parable, which I talked about previously, but I really didn't go into. The Stanley Parable is about a bunch of things, but it really is about the construction of the story of narrative design of games. And a bunch of other stuff, but you can get to the idea. But what I'm more particularly talking about is about the nature of how the story must be played out, and how the character, in a sense, well, the player, know what's going to happen, and thus, in a weird way, where the line and delineation of the player and the character is always blurred. But what I mean by that is, a character more interpreting the nature of fate. Games don't really talk about fate in any real sense. I mean as in, we know how the story's going to be played out, but that's more of a story delineation than actually we know how this will play out. And I don't think games actually cover this subject matter in an interesting manner. Because, yeah, while we're going in between these events, there is gameplay which there is variation of. But we really don't talk about the nature of how, in certain ways, our choices don't matter in between these particular moments. And maybe explore that and how a character might feel about it? Like, I'm thinking about a game like, a character learns they're in a game or a narrative where they must follow fate in a particular manner. They will always choose this, they will always do it this particular way, and how that might affect them. And it'd be interesting to see how someone would actually make that type of story. Because what is the line between a choice and fate when the in-between is all you? Because by having choice, it implicitly, at least in some matter, means that our choices matter. Even if the results don't matter, the choice meaningfully is the point. Yeah, sure, the story will end up being the same, but the way you got there wasn't, and ironically, that's what makes it meaningful. Sure, yeah, you're still going to see that ending, but how you got there was still you. Everything before then was still you. And if that's the case, I think it's interesting how we as a medium don't explore that exploration of the self in the face of fate. I don't know, maybe I'm talking out of my ass here, but I don't know. I think games can talk about this meaningfully interesting question, but we really don't ever try to. Like, for example, in this game, like, sure, you can kill everyone, or you may not. That changes how you feel about the game's story and narrative. It changes how you feel about everything that's going on around you. And I don't know, that makes it feel meaningful. Yeah, at the end of the day, your decisions don't matter, but the ones that do, they matter a lot. And I don't know, there's something meaningful to be said about the choices you make when your fate is determined. I think we should explore that more. Final part. Theory and speculation of the future. We are now at the end of whatever this script was ever trying to do. Even now, I'm very unsure if I've even done anything really worth a value. In this one, I just want to talk about theory and speculation. And how, in a large part, we remain in a mystery. I, for one, don't particularly like talking about theories or speculations. It's just how I am. I'm always one of those people who just wants to see it all and how it connects, how these lines can be built and what they can connect to. But wondering what will happen next is something that's not into me, or at least not in the way I think when somebody talks about theory crafting. They're more interested in an idea of what could happen rather than what will happen, if that makes sense. And in a lot of ways, that can create a problem, where I just want to use my favorite series of all time, One Piece, as an example of what I'm talking about. A while back during the Wano arc, there was a huge theory at the time, though it was just a theory. It was a crazy one and most people didn't believe it. But basically, it was a speculation and the belief that Onigashima, I can't pronounce it right, the attack on the island, would fail, or that Kaido would be defeated by Zoro. I don't know what made them believe that, but apparently a bunch of people did. And it's always weird to listen to some of these theories because it is so baffling. Because at certain points, after it became clear that no, that's not what's going to happen, they still believe in it and it should have happened. And they become very attached to these ideas. So much so to the point that they kind of just stop being fans of it. And that's always scary to me in a way. You can become attached to this sort of idea of what things should be instead of what it should be. It's kind of scary in a way. Being so in love with something that you wanted it to go a certain way, that you're more married to the idea of what could happen than anything about why it should happen. I don't know what's gonna come next, but I hope it's good. That's all I hope it will be. And I'm not denigrating people who make theory videos or whatnot. I think there can be interesting as it can explore different ideas and things that maybe we weren't aware of and might be actually true in a particular way. Just not in ways we ever suspected. And maybe see things that we couldn't have seen in the scope of what's happening right now. I don't know. I'm sorry for this video being very different than what I usually do. I just wanted to try something out for a little bit and see how that worked. In any case, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and next time we're talking about an RPG that copies SMT. Sort of. And also how it's still around. I'm very surprised about that. We'll talk about it next time.